Okay everybody, this is Ross. I have something really cool to show you guys in this video. What I have here are two figs that I dug up. These are my oldest fig trees. They're in their 5th year now, their 5th season. This is my Improved Celeste, my Malta Black that I had in the front of the house. If you guys have been following along with my channel, you know I've had these trees for a long time. And the reason I decided to dig them up is because we're designating the front of the house for an area that's a hardiness test for experimental varieties that I think have the highest chance of surviving the winter here. And ever since I've had these in the ground, which is I guess 5 winters now, the Malta Black and Improved Celeste have not survived without some sort of protection. And so I took them out and I figured I'd film the root system here and what these trees look like, because you don't really get a chance to look at something like this every day. You don't get to look at the root system of a 5-year-old fig tree that's been in the ground. And I'll tell you, these were a real bear to get out of the ground. I had to really wrestle with them. You know, I would say after about year 3, it's really difficult to get some of these figs out of the ground. Now, what I had actually done, for those of you guys who are, you know, really want to get creative with this, I actually took a saw and split them right down the center here. So now I actually have 2 Improved Celestes. And it originally looked like this. So a very big root system. Actually, it looks like this. And you can see this is the original. I'm going to move this piece aside because you can see on the bottom here, this is the original piece that we had planted years ago. And we had this, I think, in a, I don't know, maybe a 5-gallon size pot when I planted it. And I took the advice of people that have been doing this for a long time, the old wise advice that if you guys are in a cold climate, you're supposed to plant your fig tree 2 to 3 feet deep. And I tried to get it as deep as I could. I think I probably got it 1.5 feet deep. Buried that root system about 1.5 feet underground. And you can see how much of this was underground. That was underground that I ended up having to break off because I couldn't get this out. But this right here, this structure is a good base, a good idea of what the original root system looked like and how far underground it was. And that was a big reason why it was a bear to get this thing out of the ground. Now, because I had this tree, both of these trees, the Malta Black, the Improved Celeste, because I took that advice of people who said that if you bury your tree 2 to 3 feet deep, you'll never lose your tree. It'll keep coming back every single year. It'll never die, even in the coldest of climates. Because the deeper you guys go in the ground, the warmer the soil is at all times. It becomes a constant, stable temperature, and you're able to protect these roots from dying. You protect the roots from dying, it can always re-sprout from the base. And there's plenty of locations on this that's it's gonna re-sprout from. So, you know, to me that seems like a really inferior way to do it. And I had spent a good amount of years of experimenting to try to figure out if I should do it like the old conventional wisdom has been telling me, or if instead now I should actually be planting them above grade. I should be planting them actually a foot, the root ball should be a foot above grade. And so it's the opposite of what conventional wisdom was saying. And I've learned that that is actually a much more beneficial way of planting them. And you can very easily tell with these trees, because you can tell in the first couple years, and by the way, I was there for the first couple years, you guys weren't, but the first couple years, these trees really didn't do much. I would say it took them 3 full years before they really did much of anything. They didn't fruit for me very much at all. In fact, even last year, it was year 4, and they still didn't really fruit all that much for me. Improved Celeste really doesn't fruit all that much for me, simply because they don't like being cut all the way back. They don't like to have to re-sprout from the base. So it's good to preserve some of this wood if you can, and they can re-sprout from wood that already exists, and it's a lot easier to get them to fruit in a much higher quantity. But also because the soil is so much colder the deeper we go, and this whole thing was buried, that it didn't have all those heat units. It didn't have access to the soil temperatures that we really need for these figs. So we've been growing them at a detriment for basically 3 full years. Sometime in the 4th year, I decided and realized that I need to start doing this like I have my other fig trees here, is that I need to warm up the soil. We need to plant them again above grade, and I need to have some rocks down. So that's what I did. I put some rocks down. I had a little bit too many rocks. I've learned is that you want some of these bigger stones, you know, big boulders is really going to get all that heat. I mean, the temperature of this rock is pretty warm compared to probably this little small thing right here. You know, these little things add up, but if you have too many of them, it kind of acts just like mulch. And if you have mulch, you're cooling down the soil. So that's not what we want. We don't want to be cooling down the soil. We want to be warming it up. So that's what I did in year 4. But in year 4, I didn't really get a great opportunity because I had too many rocks. In the beginning of my season, I realized it too late. I was taking soil temperature readings, different parts of the yard, and I finally realized, oh no, these trees aren't getting off to a great start this year. And as a result, they're probably not going to fruit that well for me, because I had that many, all those rocks on it. So I quickly, you know, kind of flattened out the rocks. I had, you know, very little, few layers of them. And I decided to move on and get what I could from these trees. I did end up getting fruit from both of them at a very high quality, I'll say. It was extremely high quality fruit because we had such a dry fall. So I was super psyched about that, to get really something off of these in year 4. But now that we're in year 5, what we're going to do is actually plant them. We're taking them out of their hole. We're planting them here underneath these low tunnels, because these low tunnels that we're setting up here, you can see the bare bones. We still haven't gotten the plastic yet, but the low tunnels are really going to help these trees get the heat units that they need to fruit in the right amount of time. I'm sure they would do fine in that location. We had them in the front of the house, you know, making sure that there wasn't a lot of rocks there, because eventually what was happening was that as the tree was growing, it was indeed, if you can really tell here, because this is what it looked like, is that there's a whole layer. This top layer that you see is of this shallow roots here. And they were pretty shallow, and they were pretty wide as well. You know, a lot of times they're supposed to be 2 feet in diameter of the root ball, or of the drip line. It's going to be 2 feet in diameter of the width of the tree. So I can definitely see that. I definitely did see that. And the tree was then eventually recovering from its bad planting style, which is burying all this. Because now it's actually rooting out, and I'm sure that because it's rooting out in a more shallow soil, the temperature is a lot warmer there. And these trees would have probably performed pretty decently this year. However, again, I wanted to move them and put trees in the front of the house that are actually going to have a chance of survival here. The Malta Black and Improved Celeste, they both seem to need some sort of protection here. I would say 5 degrees is their limit. And believe it or not, the Malta Black that I want to show you guys right now, the Malta Black this year was protected. However, there is dead branches on it, and the dead branches that are on it got zapped by the 20-degree cold in the fall, and that was enough to kill parts of this tree. There are other parts of it, like this branch here, which is the thickest, and this branch here, and also part of this, that are indeed alive. But it just goes to show you that, you know, this tree really does not do well in terms of hardiness here in this location. It just needs a warmer soil, or a warmer environment. So here's another example, again, of this inferior planting method that people have been preaching for years. Here's the original root ball that we planted. I don't know if you guys can see this. You're picking that up. Yeah, you are. So this is the section of the tree that we had planted in that 5-gallon size pot, or whatever size it was, 3-gallon size pot 4 or 5 years ago. And it did eventually form a pretty big taproot, believe it or not. And it went down pretty deep and pretty wide, and it sort of branched out from this location here. That's what they do. They normally go out horizontally, these roots. And then eventually over time, as I said, it started forming more shallow roots. And eventually these trees would have recovered from the inferior method, but it took years, and it would have took years. It would have took even longer. Again, it took them the 5th year before I would have said, all right, these trees are pretty reasonable now. Because let me show you, and I can't really show you guys, I can't dig up these trees over here that I want to show you, because I want to give you a comparison. I can't dig them up because I don't want to dig them up. And they've been here now for 2 full seasons. This is their 3rd year. So the trees we just looked at are 2 years older compared to these trees. So this is 3 years old versus, well, they're not even really 3 years old. This is their 3rd season, so they're 2 years old. The other trees we looked at are 4 years old. And I swear to you, through all the fig knowledge and experience that I have, that these trees that I planted against the house over here in the southern exposure, this is Pastilliere, this is Nero 600M. Behind me is Noir de Barbentane. And then we have Italian 258. Now, I would probably not argue for the Italian 258, but maybe I could. But the Noir de Barbentane and then also the Pastilliere have just been gangbusters here in this location. The Pastilliere last year was about 9 feet tall by about 6 feet wide. And as a result, this tree has a root system that probably is further along than the Malta Black and the Improved Celeste that we've been looking at in this entire video. And I don't have proof. As I mentioned, guys, I don't have any way to dig up that Pastilliere, inspect the roots and say, oh, that's, for sure that this is the better method of planting them shallow, because these whole trees here and all the other trees that we planted since, we've planted them with the new method of actually planting them higher, giving them more soil temperatures, adding the rocks down on top of the soil. So as a result, because of these methods here, they're forming a much more strong and reliable fruiting tree 2 years sooner than the other method. So it's up to you. If you're worried about your tree dying, I wouldn't be worried all that much, because if it's a pretty healthy tree that's old, it's got some thickness to the wood, and you plant this in the spring, and then you give it some protection that first winter, it's pretty hard to lose your tree after that. These trees just keep coming back. They're extremely, extremely resilient. It's actually ridiculous. I have never lost a tree in the ground yet. I have never killed a tree. I have a feeling this year that's going to change, because some of these are very, very young and small trees. Like you can kind of see right here. This is all that's left of it. But I'm telling you guys, you really don't need to worry sometimes. We over worry about killing our trees, about them not surviving the winter. There's so many methods of winter protection to get them through this winter time. What you really need to worry about is the performance during the growing season. How are they going to perform? And if you can save yourself 2 full years, why wouldn't you take it? So I don't know. This was a pretty interesting case study. I guess there's really nothing totally conclusive, but you know, I'm not a scientist, but I'm 99% sure that planting them higher is a much better way to go in just about any climate, except for someone that's in a really dry place that needs more moisture and needs cooler soil temperatures. But for us in zone 7, zone 5, zone 6, zone 8, we should be doing this, planting them higher. I want to thank everybody out there here for watching this one, sticking through this video. Pretty interesting, huh? So we'll talk to you guys soon. Check us out on Fig Boss, Facebook, and Instagram. We'll see you guys for tomorrow's video. Take care.